Erica talks K-dramas, C-dramas, T-dramas, HK-dramas. Erica talks K-dramas, J-dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas. Do. Erica talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly K-dramas. All right, you guys, we're going to have a very exciting episode. I'm going to talk about two of my favorite movies, which both happen to take place in Minneapolis. And they were, in part, a reason why I ended up moving to Minneapolis for college, because the city is just so cool in these movies, and the environment is so cool. And I don't think it's just fictional. I think it really is like that in a way. So we're going to take a look at Untamed Heart, which was released in 1993, and Purple Rain, which was released in 1984. And even though Purple Rain came first, I'm going to do that one second because I think I have a lot more to say. And I wanted to do an episode that centered on Minneapolis because of everything that they've been going through lately. And they're still going through. It's not over, even though supposedly ICE is dialing back their activities. They aren't really. Things are still happening, and the state is still being targeted by the federal government. So I wanted to show how amazing Minneapolis is and do it through these two movies. But first, to start it out, I have a kind of funny story. So I think I've mentioned once or twice that I'm really into pygmy hippos now, and I've been watching this live feed on YouTube of Mudang, who is a pygmy hippo who was born in 2024, and she lives in a zoo in Chonburi, Thailand, called Khao Kio Open Zoo. Earlier this week, on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th, there was a rather exciting and upsetting event where in the evening around 5 p.m., the zoo was still open, but a man climbed down into Mudang and her mother Jonah's enclosure, and he was recording them on his tablet. He didn't actually touch them from anything that we saw, although at one point Mudang was off camera to the right, and he goes off camera, and then she comes running out into where you can see her on the screen, and she was near her mother Jonah then. So I think he tried to approach her and scared her, and then he was kind of trying to lure her to him. And Jonah, pygmy hippos communicate by opening and closing their mouths, and there's a bunch of different meanings for it. Of course, we don't understand everything, but it is kind of like a warning or like, hey. And so she is a very gentle pygmy hippo, but she was kind of warning him. And then he tried to get Mudang to approach him, and he started to go towards Mudang, and Jonah kind of stepped up her warning. I could see that drool was coming out, and she was opening and closing her mouth, but she didn't rush him or anything, which she could have done. She could have hurt him very badly. So what he did was very stupid. And after a minute or two, a zoo employee noticed him, and he climbed back out, and they took him into custody and took him to the police, and he was under arrest for a while. And they're going to charge him with everything that they can. And they put up a couple signs basically telling people don't climb down, and don't try to interfere with the pygmy hippos or any of the other animals, actually. And it is an incredibly stupid thing to do because you never know the reaction of an animal. These are wild animals, even though they've been living around humans. And he was very lucky. And if he had tried to touch Mudang, there's no telling what Jonah would have done because that is her baby. So it was very upsetting, and I'm glad he was arrested. And don't do stupid things like this for clicks. Don't go into their home and try to get them to act for you or whatever. Some of the watchers, we were all rewatching the video, and some of them noticed that he was snapping his fingers trying to get the pygmy hippos to respond to him as he wanted for his video. They aren't there to do tricks. It's horrible that they even have to live in zoos in the first place. It's because of humans that we have to do that. The population of pygmy hippos is very low. And so for you to go into one of these spaces endangers them, and it also endangers you. So that happened on the 17th. You would think that would be the biggest thing. But there was an incident today, evening of the 19th, but it is the morning of the 20th in Thailand because they're right now they're 11 hours ahead of us, or from where I am. So we're watching, and I don't know, somebody thought that it started around 3 a.m. Thai time. I don't think it started that early unless nobody was saying anything about it. But around 5 something, 6 something, one of the people in the chat noticed that there was a frog, a good sized frog, in this round black basin that they use to give the pygmy hippos water and food. When Mudeng was small, she was bathed in it, and it's called a kalamang. And so this frog was in the basin with all the water, and he couldn't get out, and he was really struggling. He was swimming around, and then he kept trying to kind of jump up the side, but he couldn't get enough of a jump for some reason to reach the edge. And so we all watching this YouTube live stream were very involved around the world. The Thai fans, I was translating what they were saying, and it didn't seem like they were really involved in it or paying any attention. It was like a completely different conversation for them. Kind of funny. But anyway, the people speaking in English around the world were all like, what the heck? And so we were like, contact the zookeepers, do something. And I tried translating the frog is trapped in the calamang or something like that into Thai, and I don't think the Thai fans understood. I don't know if it didn't translate right or what. We were discussing which zookeeper was going to be on duty that day, and it turned out that today is Toad's day, and Toad always comes in a little bit early. So usually they show up around 8, but one of the people watching was saying, well, he usually shows up about 7:40. So we're all we're all like watching and cheering on. We're trying to cheer on Jonah and Mudang because usually they'll go to the Kalamang to drink during the night, and they didn't do it during this period. We're like, what the heck? It was like they were avoiding it. There are monkeys, and the Thai word for monkey is ling. That was, I think, the first Thai word I learned. So there were wild monkeys around there, and they were coming down, and it was like, what the heck? None of them were going to the basin. There was something, it looked bigger than chipmunk, but it was kind of like a chipmunk. That ran past, didn't even go anywhere near the Calamang. There was another frog that went hopping by. Like, nobody was going to it. So we're all like, oh my God. But Toad is supposed to show up, so, he'll save him. So we're all waiting. He came in even earlier than 7:40. He came in at 7:36 and went in immediately to start cleaning. I don't think he saw any of these messages. He had no idea what was going on. So he's cleaning up. They have grass that they leave them overnight to eat and sleep on or whatever. So he was cleaning that up, and he flipped over the calamine, and everybody was like, "Oh, he saved the frog," and he didn't even stop to look at it or anything. Where did it go? So we kept rewatching and trying to see where the frog went, and some of us thought maybe it got trapped under the calamine when he flipped it over. Some of us thought, oh, it probably hopped away. Maybe it's over by the tree or went into the pond. We didn't know. Time goes on. Toad, I think, left the enclosure, and then he came back a little while later to clean. So it's 8:32, and he flips the calamang back to kind of wash it out and then get it ready for food. And that's when we can see the frog was underneath that whole time. I think that was actually good for it because it was struggling for so long that being just on the ground underneath the calamang that allowed it to have time to kind of rest and recoup himself. And so he sat there for like a moment when Toad returned the calamang over, thankfully not directly over him. And then he hopped away towards the tree, maybe into the pond at that point. But anyway, the frog is safe. Toad, I think he still doesn't realize that he's a hero. A lot of the zookeepers, they'll do TikTok lives, especially when they're going to feed the animals. And then we get to see the animals up close and that sort of thing. And so a couple of us said, "You're a hero, you saved the frog." I have no idea if he understood because he is trying to learn English, but I don't know if any of the Thai fans. It was weird because some of the bilingual Thai fans did show up towards the end, and I don't know if they translated to him or not. Anyway, it is what it is. Toad doesn't even know that he's a hero to that little frog. Anyway, so that was that story, kind of a feel-good story to round out the week. And so now, and this is, I don't know how long this episode is going to be, but we'll start off with Untamed Heart. So, as I think I already mentioned, the movie was released in 1993. It was directed by Tony Bill. He started out as an actor and he moved into directing. I think I've seen him in a couple roles. He had a role in Pee-wee's Playhouse. No, not Pee-wee's Playhouse. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I think that's what it's called. And I know I saw that movie, but I wouldn't be able to pick anybody out. I can barely remember seeing that movie. So, and I don't think I looked through his filmography and I really don't think I've ever seen anything else that Tony Bill has directed. So, but this is a little bit different, I think. The other things kind of leaned towards, I think it was like sports movies or something. So, not really my type of thing. The story was written by Tom Cierchio, and it was originally called The Baboon Heart, and it was supposed to take place in New Jersey, but they ended up changing the setting to Minneapolis because that's where they were going to end up filming it, and it really worked out well. Although, and I'll probably mention this again, even when I was a teenager, I was like, this just seemed very New Yorkish, or I suppose it could be New Jersey-ish. The whole diner setting and everything. And Marissa Tomei apparently did accent training to try to sound like she was from Minnesota, but to me, she, and of course Rosie Perez in particular, who plays her best friend in the movie, they just are very New Yorkish. And it was just like this kind of slice of New York just kind of dropped down in Minneapolis. But they really did try, so I can't criticize them for that. It turns out 35 of the 40 cast members were actually local actors and actresses. So I think that's really cool. It's very atmospheric. Both this movie and Purple Rain have filming during like the fall, and it's you can really see the difference when you're actually filming during a season and not just making it look like it's fall. It brings an extra layer of atmosphere that I think more film directors should really think about rather than just faking everything like snow or the cold or whatever. A large part of the movie takes place at Jim's Coffee Shop and Bakery, and that is a real restaurant. In the movie, they kind of turned it into a diner, sort of like one you would see in New York City or in other cities around the United States, but it's actually more of a breakfast place. I don't know if they still close around like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but that's about the time that they normally close, or, back in the 90s. I actually visited them. They were very nice. They had a bunch of photographs that were shot while the movie was being filmed. And I think we visited in 1993, which is when the movie came out. And already they only had one left because people had stolen the others. So that's kind of sad. But it was a nice place. They kind of outfitted it with these vending machines that take part in the story. I don't think, I'm pretty sure those were not there in real life. Anyway, and it still does exist today. So you can still visit it today. Let's see. So Marissa Tomei played Caroline, and she lives with her younger brother, her mother, and her stepfather. It's kind of, working class. Her father is a bus driver, I think, and I think her mother's a nurse. I can't remember exactly. And there's just this whole rivalry between her and her brother, not rivalry, tension, sibling tension. It's very funny. Um, so that has an effect on the plot in a way too. Rosie Perez plays her best friend Cindy, and so both Caroline and Cindy are waitresses at the diner. And they keep referring to not Rosie Perez's, Cindy's father, or was it grandfather? I think it's her grandfather. I don't think you ever actually see him in the movie, even though there is the point where there's like a New Year's party and everybody is kind of there. But anyway, there's one point where Cindy says to Caroline, my grandfather or father, I think it was grandfather though, keeps asking about you. You never come around anymore. And Caroline just she's like, oh, yeah. And then Cindy gets mad at her. And this seemed very odd ever since I originally saw it. And I wonder now if something had been cut out because it just seemed very abrupt and kind of over the top the way Cindy reacted. So Cindy got really mad and said Caroline basically that she never follows through on anything and all this stuff. And it was just like, what the heck? So Caroline had started to get a cosmetology degree or something like that. She actually was working on cutting people's hair, but I think they said it was going to be cosmetology. I can't remember exactly. You would think for as many times as I watched this movie, I would know this by heart, but I didn't, or I don't. Anyway, so that does come into play later also, but that scene where Cindy blows up at her was kind of weird. I don't know. Anyway, so they're working at the diner, and Caroline had gone through a recent breakup, and these two guys are at the diner, and they kind of recognize Caroline from some party, and so they try to chat her up, and they get her to help them with the vending machine because it's kind of problematic. It won't drop the thing that you paid for without like a specific hitting pattern that you have to do to make the stuff fall. And I think there's like also juggling the whatever the levers or pull tabs or whatever it is. Anyway, that's not about the machine. And so they're trying to chat her up and she's not really having it. She's trying to work and they're just being kind of weird. And so at night, she usually walks home and it's pretty late because they're, in the movie, they're open until like 1 or something, maybe 2. And so she ends up walking home in the middle of the night. So that night, she's walking home and she's kind of nervous because she begins to sense that somebody's following her. And it's those two guys. And trigger warning, there is an assault in this movie, and it is very upsetting. I hadn't watched this movie for several years, and it was like extra shocking to me because the scene seemed so long and her terror was so real. And so they end up chasing her down and they start to try to rape her. Then all of a sudden, they get attacked. And I think she had gotten knocked out because she was trying to fight back. And she got knocked out. So she didn't even see when this person came to rescue her. And so then you see that the rescuer is Adam, played by Christian Slater. And he's this kind of odd busboy that works at the cafe slash diner. And he rescues her, then carries her to her house, and she doesn't have a key or anything with her. So he puts her on the swing that they have on the front porch and covers her with his jacket. And then he sits on the front steps to make sure that she's okay. And he waits until she wakes up in the morning. And so he's kind of odd. The movie actually starts off with a flashback of when he was a child in, I believe it was in San Francisco. He grew up in an orphanage run by nuns, and he was sickly. And the nun would tell him the story of how he got his heart replaced. And so this is the baboon part of the story. And she always told him that the baboon king offered up his heart to Adam's father to rescue Adam and save his life. And so that's why Adam is very special, because he has a baboon heart. She was like, you waited this whole time. And, she's a little bit upset. She was scared if she could trust him. And he made sure, he kept his distance to make sure that she didn't feel threatened further, and so that things didn't, escalate in any bad way. And then he, left her where she was, because he knew she was safe at that point. And so she doesn't go to work for a couple days. She doesn't talk to anybody about what happened. She's very upset, though. And when she finally does come back, she's trying to get a ride home in the middle of the night from her brother, who has the car. And she's very nervous. She, is settling back in, trying to act like everything's normal. And I believe that night she approaches Adam and talks to him. And I don't know if it's that night or later nights, because those guys come back when Adam is taking out the trash, and they attack him, or at least one of them attacks him. And she ends up kind of having to save him because he gets stabbed. So they sort of form this kind of awkward friendship, and you can tell she starts hanging out with him, and she eventually visits his apartment, and she sees that he stole the employee group picture from, I don't know if it was Christmas or New Year's, when he'd either just started working there or hadn't yet started working there, but he had stolen it, and then I think he had folded it so you could see her in particular, as opposed to like everybody. So she starts asking him about himself, and he tells her the story about his heart. And this isn't in his apartment. I think this part takes place when he's visiting her at her house. So like Christmas time is coming up, and she said something about she loves Christmas trees. She loves, waking up and seeing them, or something like that. And so one morning she wakes up, and her stepfather is like, what happened to the tree? Because he had just gotten up and was like walking around with his coffee and newspaper or whatever. So Caroline woke up, and she discovered the Christmas tree in her room. And so later, when she talks to Adam, I don't think she right away asks him about that. Maybe she does. Yeah, I don't remember the whole order. But she eventually asks him, how did you get into my house and move the tree upstairs? And so he admits, and she kind of pries it out of him. And it's, you know, I think I realized every time that I've seen this that how creepy that is, but it's like more creepy now, because there are all kinds of stories that, true crime stories that I'm sure we've all heard, or horror movie stories or whatever, about people getting into your home in various ways. So anyway, he had crawled in through a basement window, and then he admits that he had regularly been doing that and going to watch her sleep. And I'm like, oh my God, so creepy. And somehow, though, with his personality, it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it makes sense, because you realize he is not in any way trying to harm her. He doesn't want to scare her. And he really is kind of taking care of her. And he also benefits from the sense of peace that she gives him in a way, although she's very talkative and active and that sort of thing. But I think she kind of makes him feel more comfortable in this setting. And so things kind of continue. They get close. She ends up moving in with him. or did she? Yeah, I think she does end up moving in with him in his apartment, which is very atmospheric. Like they don't use like those stock apartment. Like these are real buildings in Minnesota that they used, and you can really tell the difference. It's very nice. They've got these houses and apartments and the diner and everything filled with real stuff. Like this is what you would see in real life. It's not just a set. It's so nice. So time is going on. You see, okay, so Cindy wasn't convinced about Adam being Caroline's girlfriend or boyfriend. And so she convinces Caroline to go out on a double date because she had already offered up that Caroline was going to come. Oh, this is the night that Adam ended up getting stabbed. I forgot about that. So they went off to like party with these guys. They ended up going to Glam Slam, which was Prince's nightclub in Minneapolis. He had a chain of them, and there was the Minneapolis location. I actually went there before they ended up changing the name eventually. And you get to see the Prince symbol on the floor. It's kind of cool to see it. And so they go dancing and everything. And then I think they stop by the cafe. And Caroline goes to talk to Adam to make sure he's okay and to let him know that she's not like dating that guy that she's with, and she doesn't want to hurt his feelings or anything. This was before they had really gotten involved, and she ends up moving in with him. That's when she discovers that he's been stabbed in the back, or in the out back where the trash is, not in the back. He was stabbed kind of inside. So she takes him to the hospital and everything, and they become closer. When they get involved, I don't know at what point she really moves in with him. He has a dog who's very cute. There's this whole interchange where she asks him what the dog's name is, and he says, "I don't know. He hasn't told me yet." I thought that was cute, and I think I've heard that somewhere more recently. So somebody kind of stole that and reused it. They've got this very nice relationship, but he isn't entirely doing well, and then he got stabbed. And so they kind of warn Caroline at the hospital that he is kind of sick. And so she gently tries to convince him that he needs a heart transplant again because it's been a long time and the heart could go at any moment. And he is not willing to have another heart transplant because he really believes that he has a baboon heart and that's what makes him special. And he believes that story that he was told as a child. And Caroline, when she hears this, she's like, Adam, you really believe that? And she like thinks, she starts laughing, and then she realizes he's serious. And it's a kind of an interesting scene because she can't entirely cover it up. And I think more recent movies wouldn't have handled it in the same way, but I liked this because it was unique in a way. And so she kind of like sucked back her reaction because she didn't want to hurt his feelings. So they continue on, and she's just kind of hoping that she can eventually convince him. And at the end, I think it is, they go to a hockey game. So Minnesota used to have a hockey team, and they were called the North Stars. And in 1993 was their last year in Minneapolis. So I think this was probably filmed in 1992. So this was probably their second to last season. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, they moved down to Dallas afterwards. It was very controversial. People were very upset. And anyway, so they go to the hockey game and they really enjoyed it. I think he ended up catching a puck. And so they were riding home and he falls asleep and he was just like so happy and felt so good. And I think it was his birthday. I don't know if it was on that day, but they were kind of celebrating his birthday. And he had a present for her, and she was really touched that he would get her a present on his birthday. And they hadn't opened it before they went to the game. So they're riding back home, and they arrive at the house or the apartment, and she can't wake him up. And that's when she realizes he passed away in his sleep while they were driving home. And so it's very sad. They show the funeral. And then she goes back to his apartment to kind of clean up, and she opens up the gift that he had gotten for her. And then she starts crying because it's the records. So he had these special records that he would always listen to when he was sad. And the song in particular that you hear a couple of versions in the movie is Nature Boy. And I think the version he listened to was by, did I write it down? Yes. It was by Roger Williams. And then over the end credits, they play the Nat King Cole version. Both versions excellent. Absolutely love it. I don't know if I had ever heard the song before I saw this movie, but it's very memorable and takes me right back to the movie whenever I hear the song. But it's funny because I always mix it up with The Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, which was featured in Frankie and Johnny, which was another rom-com in a diner that took place around the same time. Anyway, we'll probably talk about that movie at some point, but yeah, no. So the song for this movie was Nature Boy, and the score altogether was absolutely gorgeous. It was by Cliff Idleman. I just thought it was a very beautiful story because it was kind of about finding uh, someone who accepts you as you are, and you fall in love, and they don't try to change you. They accept you, but they do want the best for you, and you kind of have to treasure every moment. And meeting someone else can really open a new world for you. So I really liked that movie, and I would highly recommend that you see it. I believe right now it is streaming on Tubi, so you can see it for free with commercials. And yeah, that was Untamed Heart. Now, the second movie is Purple Rain. Now, this is kind of difficult for me to do because I feel like it has to be perfect, but I don't think I can do a perfect recap and review of Purple Rain. I do feel that this movie, there's so much with it that honestly, I could have a podcast about just this movie and everything connected to it, and it would have hundreds and hundreds of episodes. I would almost never run out of things to say. So I really love it. So Purple Rain was released in 1984, in July, and I believe they did the majority of the filming in 1983. Prince had actually written a kind of a treatment. I think it was during the 1999 tour, which took place in 1982, 83. And, he kept notebooks where he would scribble down, not scribble, because he had very beautiful handwriting, where he wrote very beautifully all the lyrics he was thinking of, and, stories and jokes and all kinds of stuff. And so he had come up with a treatment for this movie, and he was going to co-star in it with Vanity. Denise Matthews is her real name. And it was going to be this story that was kind of a mixture of his actual life with kind of fantasy, not fantasy. It's pretty grounded. There's nothing fantastical, but with, this fictional life of a musician in Minneapolis. And kind of recently, I saw the notes. He was going to give Vanity's character the name, I think it was Nicarthra. And that's how the song Darling Nikki, which you've probably heard of, it's on the Purple Rain soundtrack. I always kind of wondered because I didn't really run across that many Nickies in relation to it, so I didn't know who this was referring to, but I think that's the source of Nicarthra was going to be Nikki. And so that would be when the song is played in the movie, it is a direct lashing out at the female lead, and that would have made more sense if it was Darling Nikki about Nicarthra. So he loved movies, and he would film short movies. He came up with all these ideas for music videos and stuff. It's not that every idea was great. It's not that everything had great acting or anything, but he was just brimming with creativity. And he had so many ideas and he had all this energy that he wanted to have all this output. So he he wanted to branch into filmmaking, and it was filmed mostly in Minneapolis, but apparently they did do some filming eventually in California, and I'll talk about it a little bit. So you see his band of the time, The Revolution. You also see one of his former band members, Des Dickerson, who plays another act at the nightclub where they're performing. You see Morris Day and the Time, and it's very so um a majority of the storyline takes place in and around a nightclub, which is real, First Avenue, and it's still open. And his his real life bodyguard, Chick Huntsberry, he was called Big Chick, plays like a bouncer at the bar, and he's kind of also like a confidant of the guy who's running it, who was played by Billy Sparks. And a couple of the waitresses, one of them, Kim Upshur, she was an ex-girlfriend of his. And then there was Jill Jones, who played the other waitress, the blonde waitress, who has this huge crush on Prince's character. She was a girlfriend of his, and also she worked with him. Her album is considered one of the best Prodigy albums that Prince worked on. And it has some really good songs. So I think well, there was Mia Boca, which was a single, and also G Spot was a really good song. So those are two of my favorite songs. I think Violet Blue is a lot of people's favorites. Anyway, so you see in and around this movie a lot of people that were in his real life. But then, and Prince is playing this character called the Kid. You don't get his actual name, he's just called the Kid. Prince's parents in the movie are played by Clarence Williams III. You might know him from the original The Mod Squad. And then Olga Carlatos. And I can't, she was in some movie that I was watching like a couple years ago. And I was like, she looks kind of familiar. And then I realized it was the woman who'd played his mother. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I don't remember what that movie was. Anyway, so they played his parents. And yeah, I mean, those are the main people. Oh, and then, okay, so Denise Matthews, Vanity, was supposed to play his love interest in the movie. And she was the leader of this musical group called Vanity Six, which he had created. Except she and Prince kind of had a tumultuous relationship. And I think she kind of wanted to go off on her own. So there were a lot of tensions. And she ended up breaking up with him and leaving. And I don't think I'm imagining this, I believe they had actually done some filming with her in it, but so far nothing has leaked. So if it is true that there is something filmed with her, because that Nakarthra conversation that was written in the notebook, I don't think anybody really knew about that until semi-recently, or at least not many people knew about it until semi-recently. So there's all kinds of things we still don't know. Anyway, so she left, and Prince replaced her with Patricia Catero, who uses the stage name of Apollonia, and he changed the group's name to Apollonia Six. And the other two members of the group are Susan Moonsey, who was another one of Prince's girlfriends, and she was local. She was actually the one who advised him to use kohl to line his eyes, KOHL, not COAL. And so that's how you get that really dramatic eyeliner for him. And Brenda Bennett, who was a singer who happened to be working as part of Prince's wardrobe team for his tours. And she was married to Roy Bennett, who was Prince's lighting and set designer slash director at the time. She actually tells a lot about how she ended up as part of Vanity Six and later Apollonia Six Apollonia Studio 6, which is a podcast run by Apollonia. So you might want to check that out, though the episodes are available on YouTube if you'd like to see them. So anyway, Apollonia came in, and so the storyline is that the kid is very talented, but doesn't really want to do what people want him to do. And he's low in popularity, although you really have to suspend your sense of disbelief when you're seeing it, because I don't think they advise the audience in First Avenue. Because so there's, the crowd is like cheering like crazy. And anyway, so he's supposedly losing popularity and all this stuff. And the nightclub has three acts, the kid, Des Dickerson, and Morris Day and the Time, and he doesn't need a fourth one. So when Apollonia 6, okay, so Morris Day, who's the villain of the movie, he's putting together a girl group, and he needs like a leader for the girl group. And so he sees Apollonia, he's like, oh, and so he gets her to join the group. And then he's going to try to get Billy to put the girl group into rotation for the nightclub and get rid of the kid. And so Billy like threatens the kid and all this stuff. The kid is also on the outs with his band members. Wendy and Lisa in particular want him to listen to music, and he never will. So there's tensions there. And then the kid is also, I mean, he's an adult, but he lives with his parents, and there is major domestic violence going on in the house, and nobody can really work things out. It's not, it's a really bad situation. And so the kid sees Apollonia, and I think he actually saw her before Morris Day does. And so he starts flirting with her and everything, and there's some kind of interesting interactions, like, well, I mean, it's all part of the flirting. He sees a guitar in the store window, and so she tries to say something about it, and he won't talk about it, but she can tell he likes that guitar. And then he sees her looking at something and kind of teases her about it. And oh, I skipped the whole beginning of the movie. So the movie starts with Let's Go Crazy playing. And it's really one of the best intros to a movie that introduces you to the characters and shows you what they're about and everything. So you see like Morris and Prince getting ready, and you see Apollonia coming to town, and she finds a way to sneak into the nightclub. Big Chick had gotten distracted by a fight or something going on, and so he wasn't guarding the door. So you're introduced to him. And then she turns in an application, and she interacts with Jill, who's like, Apollonia, what kind of name is that? And, all that stuff. And so I think the intro is great. I hadn't watched the movie for several years, and I started crying. I was like, oh no, this is not a good sign but I calmed down after the first song. There's all this stuff going on. And when I was little and I would read descriptions of, them preparing for the movie and stuff, they took acting classes and all kinds of stuff to get them ready to be on screen. And apparently Vanity really shone in these classes. They were like, wow. And she went off to have an acting career, not like a huge acting career. She did pretty well. She ended up having some health issues. She eventually became born again after she had a near-death crisis. And she, even before she became born again, she was apparently a really good-hearted person, just very involved in things that weren't so great. And so anyway, she really shone in the acting classes. She would have been great in this movie. And then Morris Day really shone in, you can see in the scenes in the movie, there's this very funny scene between him and Jerome, this whole kind of like who's on first routine where they do what's the password. And it is great. And it is even more astonishing if you haven't read Morris Day's memoir. It is wonderful. I highly recommend it. I wish he had made it more about himself, but I think he was very conscious of people wanted to know about his relationship with Prince, and so he focused more on that. But I would just like to say I really enjoyed finding out about him growing up, his influences. Like there was a section where he talks about the drummers that influenced him. I don't know who most of those people are, but it was fascinating. And his mother, by the way, she passed away relatively recently in the last few months. And she was important to the history of Morris, Prince, and their friend Andre Simone. She managed their band when they were in high school. And so she'll come up in stories when they talked about their time growing up. And I'm sure Morris and his family are still working through the grief. And I just want to extend my condolences. So Morris was doing an excellent job at acting. And of course, you see the Time members. By that time, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis had been fired, so they're not in the movie. There were three people replacing them because also Monty Moore wasn't there. And I don't know if I know why that happened. I don't know if he ended up going off with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. I know he worked with them sometimes, so I'm not sure. But anyway, there was still Jesse Johnson who played guitar, and then Jellybean Johnson, he was the drummer, and he was the first member of the Time to pass away. He passed away just this past November. It was rather unexpected and it was quite shocking. And he was a wonderful person. He was not only a drummer, but he also played guitar and he had done, interviews. He was instrumental in trying to get the Minneapolis Music Museum up and running, and his family is grieving also. So I just want to send out my condolences to them too. And one of the things I have a story about Jellybean and Morris. Morris and Prince were not getting along about this time. Morris was going through a lot of stuff. He was very angry over the firing of Jimmy and Terry. And I think he had also other issues going on. And you can read about it in his book. So he showed up one day finally. Like they would have to go hunt him down because he wouldn't come to the filming. He would be doing stuff. And so they would have to go find out where he was and follow from location to location, like it was some sort of scavenger hunt. And so he came, and Prince got really mad at him. So they almost got into an actual physical fight. And so Big Chick pulled Prince back, and Jellybean Johnson held Morris back. And so they didn't have an actual fight, but yeah, tensions were really high. And I think Morris left Minneapolis pretty much after this whole thing happened because he was so angry about it all and he wanted to make it on his own. So that's just kind of a setting type thing. And rewatching the movie, like there is some very upsetting stuff. Like there's a scene where a girlfriend of Morris comes along and she's all angry with him because he mistreated her in some way. And Morris tells Jerome to take care of her, and he picks the woman up and throws her into one of those big dumpsters. And yes, it's very misogynistic. But I think things like that, like I think it's to show you as funny as this character is, he is the bad guy. He is like red flag city. He's good looking, he's charming, he's funny, but do not trust this guy. So I just think that's the overall message. So Prince, or the kid, is upset when he finds out that Apollonia is working with Morris and he's trying to warn her and stuff. And there's this whole thing where they stop by Prince's or the kid's house, and Prince, the kid, I mean, doesn't even look in the window because he knows his parents are always fighting, so he just assumes that's what they're doing. But Apollonia is looking in the window and they're making out. And she's like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a freak show." And like, I think as they walk away, he glances up and sees that they're making out, and he's like, "Oh." But that might be me inferring it. I can't remember exactly how it takes place. So they go to his basement room and have a interesting night together. He plays the music from God, which is one of his songs that was not on the main Purple Rain album. It's a very beautiful, haunting song, and they end up making love to it. So there you go. I think that was their first night together. Not not the very first night that they knew each other, but the first night that they spent together. But there are other things, like they ride around on his motorcycle. The motorcycle's a big thing. And apparently a bunch of different motorcycles that weren't even the same model were used in the movie. And so if you look closely, you can probably notice the difference. So there's this whole thing where they're riding around by the lakes and everything. And he does this whole thing where he teases her about, if she wanted to be with him and work with him, she would have to bathe herself or purify herself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. And so there's this whole thing where she undresses and then she gets into the lake and it's freezing cold. And that's when he reveals, well, he kind of tries to stop her before she jumps in, but she jumps in too fast. And then he's like, that ain't Lake Minnetonka. That's the wrong place. So, just an FYI, the part where she's actually in the water was actually filmed in California because the water was so cold when they were filming in Minnesota that she was, I think, getting hypothermia. They did film some other stuff, some of the like stuff where he's riding the motorcycle and everything in California as well. But a lot of it's in Minneapolis, so you get to see what the city looks like. But I didn't realize any of it had been filmed in California until recently, so I didn't know because things change. Or remember how the freeways were when you didn't even live there at the time. There's all this stuff going on, and there's a lot of tensions. The kid doesn't know how to really deal with people, and there's a lot of tensions between him and his father. So his father is a very talented musician, and there's this whole thing where his father's like, I don't write down my music. I don't need to do that. I'm not like you. And then later, much later, you find out the father was completely lying because the kid is throwing a fit. And I believe that was after his father shot himself, which was after a big fight with Prince's mother or the kid's mother. And so the father is in the hospital and they don't know if he's going to make it or not. And the kid goes home and he's like tossing everything in the basement. We're in this room that isn't his bedroom. And he discovers tons of sheet music that his father had written. And so he looks at that, and I think that's when he plays Father's Song, which is another beautiful song by him. That was never officially released until more recently with the deluxe Purple Rain soundtrack and that sort of thing. But it had been circulating. And yeah, so definitely listen to God and also listen to Father's Song. So he kind of realizes like not everything he knows is what he assumes it to be, or, people don't necessarily say what is the truth. And so he had kind of ended up on the outs with Apollonia. And he also realizes he's been treating Wendy and Lisa and the band members wrong, the other band members. And so he finally listens to their song and he ends up turning it into a beautiful rock ballad type thing. And so he ends up debuting it on this final night in the nightclub. Well, final night, I mean, it's final night in the movie. And surprises everybody. And yet they're still able to play this song with him because I guess everybody else listened to their music, but Prince didn't. So they were all familiar with it and they could play along. I don't know. And so everybody knows what happened with his father. And Morris makes some comment and then ends up feeling guilty because he made a rude comment and realized how it came off. And Apollonia is there and she kind of wants to make up with him. He thinks that the crowd hates him still. And so he runs out before he really hears how the crowd is reacting. And he's in the back alley, and Jill follows him out. And it's interesting because that's one of the most memorable things to me. I saw this movie when I was like 9 years old, the first time, I think. Or was I? Yeah, I was still 9 years old. I hadn't turned 10 yet because I think it was on one of those pay channels, and my friend had a free weekend. And so we stayed up really late to be able to see this. And the unrequited love and the pain that this blonde waitress felt for him, it just really struck me even when I was a kid. And so anyway, that was that storyline. Yeah, it was a very interesting story, very different. I think other people have tried to kind of have a similar movie and they haven't quite managed. eh, there are criticisms, of course, of the movie. It's not perfect. Oh, there is this person on, I see them on Instagram, but I think they're on other platforms as well. Their username is Black Zeus X, and they do kind of recaps, very funny recaps of things. And he did it for Purple Rain and also for Under the Cherry Moon. And it is hilarious. He goes around calling Apollonia baddie. It's very cute the way he does it. He does a lot of He-Man and She-Ra videos also. So anyway, look him up because it's a very funny recap. I thought I saw one that covered the whole movie, but then when I went onto his Instagram account, it was like a truncated one. Maybe because we couldn't have the whole video when he did that. I don't know. I think I did see the full video somewhere. Anyway, I digress. So it was a very interesting story. If you know anything about Prince, I mean, he was a genius. He grew up in a troubled household. His father was a musician, and his parents did not get along. And I mean, there are some fictionalized aspects here. You know, his father, to my knowledge, never shot himself or tried to commit suicide. And they actually divorced when he was 7 years old. So there was a split household situation, and Prince had a lot of issues with his stepfather. You know, his difficult relationship with his father continued for his whole life. His relationship with his mother, also very difficult because I think he was dealing with a lot of issues. And the whole topic of Prince, I don't like talking about it with people who don't know because they, for some reason, interject all kinds of weird biases against him, and they aren't just like accepting him as he was, or like they aren't willing to hear this other thing because they have these impressions. I don't know. It's just weird. I don't want to discuss it with people. But there have been a couple really nice interviews that have come out for the 10th anniversary of his passing. And so I just want to refer to them in case you want to look up more information and get kind of a more varied, grounded view of Prince as he was. So The Guardian in the UK had an article, and it has a very long title, so I didn't even write the entire title down, but look this up. He'd gaze at the stars and go, I'm going to be up there one day. Prince by those who knew him best. And that has, I think it's like 10 interviews ish, 10 ish. They talked to George Clinton, Andre Simone, Susan Rogers, who was one of his sound engineers, Matt Fink, Bobby Z, who were two of the members of the Revolution. And they actually started with him. Well, Bobby Z knew him even before, but they started as his tour or part of his touring band in 1978. And let's see. Oh, Misha Paris, who recorded one of his songs, or actually, I think a couple of his songs. I'm not entirely sure. Who else? Oh, they interviewed Apollonia, and it was very interesting what some of these women were saying. They interviewed Susan Moonsey, who I've always been kind of curious about, and she actually talks about how in the 1999 liner notes he says, "All my love to Vashti." And I had always wondered because Vashti, you may know, was the queen in the Book of Esther who ended up getting replaced because she wouldn't obey the king. So I was like, this was a very odd reference for Prince to make. And I didn't realize, I mean, I don't know that anybody realized, Susan Moonsey's middle name was Vashti. So when he was saying this, or Vashti, I'm not sure how she pronounces it, this was a very nice note for him to include in the album. And let's see. What else? Can't remember who else, but it's very informative. You get all these different views. You see how kind he was and also how he could also be mean. Oh, they interview Candy Dulfer, saxophonist who worked with Prince on and off for many years. And their viewpoints, I think, are very helpful to get a more varied view of him. Also, I came across a video from StoryCorps, and I think that they feature StoryCorps on NPR. I believe that's where I used to hear their stories, but it came across Instagram for me. And so it was an interview with Yvette Thompson and her mom, Sue McLilly. And so Yvette, when she was a little girl, was babysat by Prince. They lived in the neighborhood by his family, and so they kind of mentioned how things were and how things changed and how they knew him over the years. And it's funny and it's sweet and I just like it. Oh, and they also in the Guardian article also interviewed his cousin Chaz Smith. And Chaz was actually in his band at one point and I believe he got kicked out to have more stay in there instead. But he doesn't talk about that in the interview. So there's so much that I could say, and I can't make this perfect. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I can only, oh my God, what is with all this beeping? um, I can't, yeah, I would never finish this. This would be like the podcast episode that I edit until the day I die. But I hope that, even if this isn't your type of movie, give it a chance. It's very interesting. The music is wonderful. The setting is wonderful. It's very atmospheric, and I know I keep saying that. There's so much stuff that you see in the movie that you might have seen in the music videos. So, like, there's that little spin that Prince does in the hallway of the house when he's looking for his father after he finds his mother crying on the curb. And that's very iconic. Some of the music from the Purple Rain album was recorded in 1983 as part of a benefit concert. And I think it's not the raw recordings that are on the album, but you can definitely, so some of it was recorded way before it was actually released. Well, I mean, it was released in 84, but, there's been a lot of talk about the song Purple Rain and how that came about. Prince was looking for something that would be really big. So he ended up talking about how that could happen. I think they went to go see a Willie Nelson concert. Yeah, I mean, it was a very influential movie. And it's funny because Purple Rain is the album that most people seem to know when they think of Prince. But I would not even list that in my top 5 albums, even though I absolutely love When Doves Cry. Yeah, I don't know, because I think a lot of the things that were B-sides or that were left off that album would have made it one of my top albums, but yeah, no. Anyway, it was very influential on me seeing that and then seeing Untamed Heart. And I did end up going to University of Minnesota because Minneapolis just seemed so wonderful. And I do think it is so wonderful. The people of Minneapolis are still going through a lot. ICE has not left. And apparently they were, as of this morning, which is April 28th, 2026, they were raiding preschools again. So this is going to be a long haul. And this is kind of cheesy, but on the back cover of the Purple Rain album, Prince had put this phrase, "May you live to see the dawn." And then years later, I think it was around the emancipation period when he got married the first time, he said somewhere, Welcome to the Dawn. Maybe there was even a song, Welcome to the Dawn. I'm going to have to like look this stuff up again. But I think because it was kind of replaced, it's kind of, we don't have to look for the dawn anymore. But I think we've kind of reverted and we're in a bad place. And so I think we're back in a sort of era where I would say, may you live to see the dawn. And I am hoping, and I know this is cheesy, I'm sorry. I am hoping that I can one day soon say, Welcome to the dawn. And maybe at that point we'll talk about something else related. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, if you stuck through all of this with me, thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at ericatalksdramas@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at ericatalksdramas. And you can also find me on YouTube, where I also have my KC videos. That's my Korean actors cat index videos. I haven't updated those in a long time, but I'm still keeping track, and I plan to do a bunch of quick updates at some point. I don't know. So anyway, I have no way of knowing which thing I'm going to cover next, because there are several K-dramas which have been wonderful, and there are also some other stylized things, like I was talking about doing the Buffy episode and an Angel episode, and who even knows. I want to do a Squid Game 2 episode, which focuses on Top, and he has already released his solo album, which I didn't think was going to happen this soon, which I know people are like, it took forever for that to be released. I know, but I still thought I would get my episode out before he released it, so it's kind of funny. Anyway, so I hope I will see you again. You can listen to these episodes on YouTube or on Podbeans or on Amazon Music. And have a good night. And may you live to see the dawn. Good night. Also, I would like to add a very special thank you to my Prince friends, Gina, Jill, Lauren, and Victor, who kind of helped me with some ideas for things to say in the episode. So thanks for putting up with me.
Erica talks K-dramas, C-dramas, T-dramas, HK-dramas. Erica talks K-dramas, J-dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas, but mostly K-dramas. Erica talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly